Hello everyone, this is Taylor and welcome back to Discomfort Films. This is kind of a follow-up to last year's Halloween video where I talked about 5 found footage films that I thought deserved more attention. It was a really fun video to make and got me to check out some films I've been meaning to watch for a while and films that wouldn't have normally been a high priority for me, so yeah, I thought it would be fun to do another version this year. Except the theme / subgenre is vampires.
Don't come to my house or else I'll suck your dick. Blood. I'll suck your blood. Oh, shit.
Why? No particular reason. I'm personally more of a werewolf girl, but something about vampire media just hits different. Maybe it's something to do with the fact that vampire myths exist in practically every culture in some form, and something about them, whether it be romantic or monstrous or tragic, just captures people's imagination. There's so many great films in the vampire subgenre that explore all kinds of tones and themes. And I will be focusing on the ones that I don't think get enough attention, so there will be no The Lost Boys, Draculas, Let the Right One In, Morbius, Twilight Breaking Dawn Part 2 on this list, as great as they are. Honestly, a few of these movies that I talk about here could probably be their own video, and they might be at some point, but for now, here are just some quick thoughts on some lesser-known vampire flicks I think are worth checking out this Halloween. Martin.
I'd like to be normal. I just have a sickness. The only way I can survive is by drinking blood.
Directed by George A. Romero, Martin is about the titular character, a disturbed young man who believes he's a vampire who moves in with his elderly religious cousin. It's left ambiguous whether the main character actually is a vampire or is just suffering from delusions. There's an interesting dynamic with Martin and the cousin where Martin is not superstitious and sees his supposed vampirism as kind of a medical condition, whereas the cousin is super religious and fully buys into the mythology. Then there's the cousin's granddaughter who just believes that Martin needs psychiatric help and argues with her grandfather for enabling his delusions. All throughout, there's this juxtaposition between old superstitions and modern science and psychology. The film is slow-paced and melancholic, and the grainy, washed-out visuals reflect the state of the city and the characters. There is a lost 3-hour director's cut of the film that was allegedly found a few years ago, but I haven't been able to find much concrete information about it since, unfortunately. The editing in the current version feels choppy at some points, and sometimes feels like it jumps from one scene to another without much transition, which I assume can be attributed to that. But as it is, Martin is still a great movie, and one of Romero's best. If not his best, honestly. And it grows on me every time I watch it. Word of mouth continues to spread, and Second Sight recently released the film on 4K, so excluding the day the director's cut is hopefully released, there's no better time to check it out. Ganja and Hess.
I will not be tortured. I will not be punished. I will not be guilty.
Anthropologist Dr. Hess is stabbed by his mentally unstable assistant with an ancient African dagger in a murder-suicide, which gives him an insatiable thirst for blood. He begins a relationship with the assistant's widow, Ganja, and introduces her to his dark secret. The film has an interesting and often frustrating history that I won't fully go into here for time. Basically, the studio wanted a blaxploitation vampire film to cash in on the success of Blackula at the time, but director Bill Gunn made more of an experimental art house film that the distributors didn't know what to do with. Multiple recuts of the film were released under different titles and were very poorly received, and the uncut version unfortunately wasn't available to the general public until after the director's death. As for the film itself, the first time I watched it, I admired it a lot but needed some time and reflection to process it. However, it's one of those movies that stuck in my mind, and the more I thought about it, the more I realized I'd never seen a film quite like it before. It uses the vampire story to explore themes like the cultural and religious alienation faced by Black Americans. It feels very ahead of its time in both its ideas and execution. It avoids the common stereotypes you often see in Black characters from this era, and both the writing and the performances give the protagonists a lot of dignity and agency. The performances are great, especially Marlene Clark as Ganja, and Hess is played by star of the original Night of the Living Dead, Dwayne Jones. Deathdream, aka Dead of Night.
The boy went away to fight a war. A man came back. But something came with him. Something unspeakable.
After allegedly being killed in action in Vietnam, a young soldier named Andy returns home to his family. However, he's unusually quiet and withdrawn, and soon after his arrival, a dead body turns up drained of blood. It's kind of a mix of vampire and zombie tropes, but Andy is undead and consumes blood, so that's enough for me. This is exactly the kind of movie I have in mind when I make these videos. Deathdream is directed by Bob Clark of Black Christmas fame, and while it's not on the same level, it's still very well made and deserves to have more discussion around it. One of the inspirations was the story of the monkey's paw, which, if you know that story, you can probably guess where the film is going. What I really love about it is how much it commits to the tragedy aspect. The PTSD allegory is pretty obvious, but there's such a bleakness to its delivery, and the movie takes a lot of time to humanize all these characters, so you just feel bad for them when shit inevitably hits the fan. The acting is also great, and the family dynamics are very believable. It's one of those movies where I feel that if you remove the supernatural elements, it would still work as a straightforward drama, but there's still plenty of eerie and unsettling moments. Blood and Donuts. In Blood and Donuts, a vampire named Boya is awakened from his slumber by a stray golf ball and gets involved with a cabbie who's being harassed by criminals and a young woman who works at a local donut shop. This movie exudes the 90s Canadian indie film aura. If you know, you know. It focuses on some quirky average Joes and has a low-key sense of humor. It's not like I was busting a gut laughing, but it was still an enjoyable experience. It makes pretty good use of its low budget and has a strong cast that lends a lot of likability to the main characters. It also features David Cronenberg in a supporting role as the crime boss, and he is great. The Addiction.
You can never get enough, can you? But you learn to control it. You learn, like the Tibetans, to survive on a little.
The Addiction follows a philosophy student who is turned into a vampire after being bitten by a woman in the streets and must come to terms with her new addiction to blood. Directed by Abel Ferreira, The Addiction is stylish and moody as hell. It's a dense film that uses vampirism and addiction to delve into ideas about theology and philosophy, good and evil, determinism, human will, etc. The dialogue can feel a little long-winded at times, but I still found it fairly engaging. There's also a couple instances of the film using archive footage of real historical atrocities like the Holocaust and the My Lai massacre, which could be considered in poor taste depending on the viewer. Personally, it reminded me of something you would see in a Michael Haneke film, in the way it combines the fictional violence and conflict with the real-world violence and conflict. This was filmed on location in New York City, and like the rundown streets in Martin, the location and the setting adds a lot of character to the film. I also love the music, both the original score and the songs chosen for the soundtrack. Mr. Vampire. Okay, so this might not be overlooked by everyone since this is apparently a franchise, but it's new to me. Hong Kong cinema in general is kind of a blind spot. I've seen a handful of films, but there's still so many on my watch list, so I stumbled across this one and thought it was a fun opportunity to kill two birds with one stone. In Mr. Vampire, a reburial of a corpse in a small village goes awry when the corpse comes back as a hopping vampire, or Jiangshi. I am 100% sure I'm not pronouncing that right. And it's up to a Taoist priest and his two apprentices to stop him. It's a fun blend of comedy, horror, and straight-up action, and I really enjoyed all these insanely elaborate martial arts slapstick set pieces. This whole sequence in the morgue or whatever this is was probably the highlight for me. Like I said, not every single bit landed for me, and I think the movie kind of peaked with that morgue sequence in my opinion, but I still had a lot of fun with it. I loved the silly, goofy vibes, and I thought the combination of martial arts and slapstick was really fun. So anyway, those were... Last year I did 5, but this year I think I did 6. Lesser known vampire films that I would recommend to check out. Please let me know your thoughts if you've seen any of these films. And if you enjoyed this video, please consider leaving a like and subscribing to see future content from me, even though my upload schedule is pretty piss poor, if I do say so myself. And that's on chronic illness and working in retail, baby. I'm kinda sleep deprived in case you couldn't tell. Anyway, thank you for watching, happy Halloween, be safe, have fun, whatever the fuck you're doing, goodbye.